Thank you for coming to this workshop. I'm Kate Freeman. I know wasn't on your program as being a presenter, but I'm filling in for Shams, who has, for some excellent reasons, is just going to be our technical guy. So before we begin, we'd just like to get a feel about who's here, where you're from, and what you do. So how many of you work for an accreditation evaluation agency? How many of you work for a university or institution? How many work for a governmental agency? Okay, we got a couple. How many of you feel very confident about non-traditional and non-academic secondary school credentials? Okay, all right.
I'm watching out for
Good.
you.
Okay, then we hope you'll be able to contribute and add your thoughts. So we have a little exercise for you that we would like you to do before we begin. So this is what you need to do. We want you to line up at the front here in the order of your years of experience and credentials evaluation. But here's the kicker. You cannot talk to each other. So this end, the most experience. This end, the least experience. So go for it.
Go.
No talking.
Does anybody know
Can
sign
you-
language?
Other.
How do you know? We want it exact order. Who's got the most years of experience? No, you can do it. It's been done. If you have to curve around.
Most years.
Oh, this is the person with the most is over here. The person with the least is at that end. You have to decide, but you can't talk to each other. Now, we need it exact. You just can't bunch.
If it's the same number,
You
then
can
yeah.
fig-
We
You
can
can
spread
figure it
out
out.
along the wall.
Yeah,
That helps.
okay.
We'll extrapolate.
So you feel confident that you're, okay.
We can secretly whisper it to each other.
Oh, Shams,
I won't tell.
but you're doing it.
Sorry, I like this.
Okay. All right, so why don't we start with, see if we're correct. I guess, Karen, you're? Oh, sorry. How many
How many years?
years? 24?
24.
Okay.
Okay, can anybody beat 24? Once, twice, sold. Okay. 24. 18.
11.
11. 14.
Oh,
Okay.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
All right, nonverbal communication skills.
Okay.
11.
11.
Okay. 8. 8. 7. 6. 4. Very good. Nice.
Nice. Welcome.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right.
Oh, pretty
Okay, have a
Thank
seat.
you.
Hey, have a seat. Are we? We're holding questions to the end, or we take them as they come? We're taking questions as they come, right? Okay. Okay, we have a lot to get through in this presentation. We know we have a lot of people from other countries, and so and in fact, we're covering some credentials from your country. So if you have something to contribute to the presentation, we will appreciate it. As you can see, you're going to be recorded and videotaped. This workshop is part of TISEP's secondary school certificate. So any of you who have done this workshop and the morning workshop and also participated in the webinar will be eligible for the online examination that you can take in order to earn that certificate. And so we're videotaping this for anybody who could not come to the conference to do these workshops. They will be able to watch them online later. So if you do have a question, we have a microphone. And if you have a comment, please, we need the microphone because we need it to be recorded. If not, we'll try to repeat your question and your answer. Okay? So let us introduce ourselves. I'm Kate Freeman. I'm a senior credential analyst at Spantran, the evaluation company. I'm based here in Philadelphia.
My name is Shams Chowdhury. I'm the Director of Operations at Spantran, based in New York. And this is my colleague, Ildiko Borsch.
I'm also at Spantran.
And I will say I'm just tech support today. So Ildi and Kate have put in a lot of research and a lot of work into this presentation. I don't want to take any credit, so I'm just here to make sure the slides work.
Okay.
You gonna start?
Now he's got to do the video. And then you start, right?
I think, well,
Oh, yeah, next, sorry.
TVET
Can you do
and
the video?
apprenticeships, maybe I'll go.
Okay. All right, we're going to start with homeschooling. We have a little quick quiz. Is homeschooling prevalent in your countries? Raise your hand if it is. Okay. And if so, can you give us some reasons why parents or guardians would homeschool in your country? Yes?
Here in the U.S., I don't know if anyone wants to listen to this, if it was just from the U.S., but there are a lot of parents who, sorry. So I know in the case of the United States, is this on?
It's on.
Okay. In the case of the United States, it can vary. I know some parents have issues with maybe local curriculum. They either don't trust the school system or they will homeschool their children if their children happen to have maybe special needs that they feel the schools in the local areas can't provide assistance for, that sort of thing. I think religious reasons might also be a factor as for why some people in the U.S. homeschool. And sometimes it's a matter of maybe a parent's occupation. I was homeschooled for a very brief amount of time just because I grew up in the military and moving stations sometimes came in the middle of a school year, but while we were getting situated, we still needed to be taught. And so, mom had some resources and, taught my sister and I for a brief amount of time. So just that kind of, it can vary widely in the U.S.
Okay. Any non-U.S. people where homeschooling is prevalent? Do you have any comments? Okay. Well, we're going to review several different countries where homeschooling is very prevalent. As the slide says, it's really, you'll find it mostly in Australia, Canada, Mexico, Chile, New Zealand, the UK, and the USA. In most homeschool situations, the students are taught at home by their parent or guardian and not at a brick and mortar school. And these are some of the reasons, and many of them you spoke about. Mainly in the U.S., it's sometimes for religious reasons are a very big reason for homeschooling. The parents have concerns about the quality of instruction. They don't like the schools. Maybe the schools are the school system the schools are not in good condition. They don't feel the teachers are good. Bullying is another big one where students are just not. They don't like to go to school because they don't feel comfortable there. The other children tease them. Another big one in the United States is people who have they're aspiring to something. So maybe they're athletes, maybe they're actors, maybe they're singers. So they need to go out on auditions or they have tournaments or something. So they just can't be in school all day because they need to be out doing their auditions or anything to do with athletics. And what we found, especially in European countries, is they don't want their children to be exposed to sex education in school. Okay, this is a reason in the United States, but we found that it was much more prevalent in Europe than it is here.
Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of a show and tell. We're going to play just a
a clip from a movie called Adventures in Homeschool. It's about a young student and his mother's homeschooling him. It's based in Canada. I don't know how accurate it is in terms of like actual education credentials, but just to give you an idea of what it's like.
Hey, Liam. Okay, what are your obstacles for tomorrow's exam? Go.
Sometimes I get lazy with my handwriting and my Y's look like J's.
Yes.
I can do better, Mom. And I get nervous sweats. Go to Cambridge, study with Stephen Hawking, become the second most famous astronomer of all time.
Honey, I think you can become most famous.
I mean, Stephen Hawking, come on.
Hot hint for today's practice exam? It's just a practice. But tomorrow, not too much water pre-exam.
Why not?
Too many bathroom breaks.
Right.
Okay, batter up. Ready?
I'm already a little bit excited.
Yeah.
I'm sweating.
Really?
It's like excite sweat.
That's fun.
I'll feel it.
Yeah. Ew. Okay. All right. Ready? You may begin now.
Oh, nuts. Can I sharpen my pencil?
Yes. We should get you a good mechanical pencil. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Let's celebrate!
Okay. I am.
What do you mean?
I'm celebrating.
When?
Right now.
Now?
Right now.
You're celebrating right now.
Yep.
Well, we can really celebrate at prom tomorrow night. Are you excited? We can really cut loose.
Yeah, I was thinking of maybe just doing some silent reading.
Liam, when you graduate, you have to have a prom. It's a rite of passage. Who did you invite?
You?
Well, of course I'm going to be there, sweetie.
You're my best friend.
You know what? I love you, infinity. Go outside and play, kiddo. Now, remember, always put down an answer, even if you don't know the answer, and start with the easiest questions first, and then move on to the hardest questions, because that way you will leave yourself more time for the things you don't know, and you won't stress out about the things that you do know, because you'll be freaking out about some of the harder questions. Liam?
Wow, there's so many students.
Honey, focus. Focus, okay?
Yeah.
Ugh, I had to go to the school. I had to go to this school for stupid people, but you don't. You're going to Cambridge because you are special and you're perfect, all right? Remember that. Now we put you in layers because if it gets cold, you can put them back on. When you get hot, you can take them off. Okay, and don't look all up in the sky back and forth like Stevie Wonder if you don't know the answer, because they will nail your butt for cheating. They will, okay? Now, when you pass this test, you are a high school graduate. Okay, now go get him. What? Oh.
Hi, Autumn.
Hi, Liam.
Meet Autumn. She runs a not-for-profit that protests cruelty to snails. All this training for you, my dear.
And you can begin now.
Only losers get 97 friggin' %.
I've been here all morning. Autumn insisted that we come early.
Gross.
You know, Autumn's been requesting we do a unit on Bolivian weaving. She can't get enough of it. Get this. She made a traditional Bolivian flat knot for me. I've been using it as a phone case.
Liam is obsessed with black holes.
I love it when you do that.
Thank you. Do you want me to talk dirty?
Yes.
Looks like we're gonna need a new trophy case. Huh?
These aren't trophies, they're just awards for participation.
We have a very high rate of participation.
It's Dumbo. Participation's mandatory, not award-worthy.
Well, at this school, it's award-worthy. You know. I'm the principal.
Okay.
That's nice.
Normally that impresses people.
My name's on this one. It's a participation award for the debate club.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, hey, congrats.
Thanks. I got pregnant on that field trip.
That's quite a bit of participation.
I have a son. I homeschool him.
Homeschool kids.
Normally that impresses people.
Yeah.
So that's just a very extreme version of homeschooling. So here are a list of countries where we know that homeschooling is definitely legal. So you will see students that would be homeschooled here. So we also have a list of schools where countries where it's definitely illegal. It's in the education law and it is not permitted. And these are countries where it has restrictions. Mainly the restrictions have to do with you have expatriate families. The parent has to be a certified teacher. It's only for gifted or disabled or physically challenged students. Sometimes you can only do primary school and sometimes you can only do secondary school. So there are definitely countries where there are restrictions. And these lists are not exhaustive by any means, but this is only where we found definite information. And these are some countries where the status is unclear. We say it's unclear in that it's sort of written in the country's laws on education, but sometimes the local governments or the local school districts will not respect that law, or it's the way it was written in the law is very ambiguous. So it could be interpreted in many ways, and mostly it's illegal or it's legal. So this is definitely a problem in these countries. So we're going to go through a few countries first. In the US, you can see it was only 0.4% of students are homeschooled. That was as of 2016. They can be taught in many different ways, and the way they're taught is based on how the families want to do it. So they can do distance learning, or they can, which is either an online program. They have many of these cyber charter schools, which are usually sanctioned by the state, where the students can go on and do their secondary education that way. They could have the parents teach their children one-on-one. What is very common, especially in religious communities, are they have these homeschool cooperatives where parents or families band together and they teach the children all together instead of one-on-one. The curriculum that they use, it varies. Some states say they have to follow the state curriculum. Some states say no. There's no national homeschool law in the United States. They can get their curriculum from many, many different sources. There are any number of websites that provide a curriculum and teaching methods for homeschool parents in the United States. But they have to meet the state requirements. So how you teach it is up to you, as long as you teach them to the state requirements. Now, the problem is, with homeschool children in the United States is documentation, because no school district will issue or award them a diploma because they did not go to those schools. So what parents do is go online and they buy templates for diplomas and transcripts. So it's, especially if you're working in a college or university in admissions, this is all you're going to get, is a diploma that somebody made up and a transcript that will show everything that they studied. So many colleges and universities in the United States have standards that they want to look at when they make an admissions decision on a student who has been homeschooled here. Now, Canada is very interesting for many reasons. It's not a very big movement yet in Canada. As you can see, only 6,000 students in the whole country are homeschooled. And it's very much started as a faith-based movement, but apparently this is changing. Homeschooling is allowed in every province, but what they can earn is very different depending on the province, and we'll go through that. In Canada, it looks like many parents choose to homeschool their children through elementary school and then send them to a regular secondary school for reasons that you'll see in the next few slides. And I should also say, if you have any question, feel free to ask us and interrupt us, because we want to make sure that we get the answer answered, because we have so many different topics to go through. So what kind of documentation are you going to get from a homeschooled student from Canada? Well, it's very interesting. The provinces will only award a secondary school diploma to the students who have attended an accredited secondary school. So if you're being homeschooled, you're not in an accredited secondary school. So in most provinces, you're not going to be able to get the provincial secondary school diploma. So because of that, many students sit for the General Education Development, or the GED examination, which we'll discuss that a little later in the presentation. But this is it's a formal examination to document the knowledge somebody would have attained if they had attended a regular secondary school. What other students do is they earn high school credits through correspondence schools, and these high school credits are recognized by colleges and universities in Canada. And so they get enough of these high school credits through the correspondence and virtual schools to actually earn a secondary school diploma. And so they have those things to show when they apply for admission to a college or university. And if you go on the websites of every college and university in Canada, they have specific instructions for homeschooled students. Some will not accept the homemade diplomas and transcripts. Some say, we welcome you. Some will do placement testing to decide whether the student meets the requirements. Some will rely on standardized testing, such as the SAT or the ACT examinations. So I'm not going to go through these point by point, and by the way, we will send you this PowerPoint at the end of the conference, so you can go through these. But you can see each province has its very, very, very different examinations. For example, in Alberta, you can't get an Alberta high school diploma, but you can sit for the Alberta high school equivalency diploma. So that's how they get around it in Alberta. Same thing in British Columbia, no British Columbia diploma. They can get it in Manitoba if they meet the graduation requirements. But I wasn't able to figure out what does that mean. So it's, and nobody would really give me an answer, because there really aren't that many homeschooled students in Manitoba, so I really don't think they've figured that out yet. Same thing, New Brunswick, no diploma. Interestingly, in Newfoundland, they get, as long as they have followed the provincial high school curriculum and they go to their local high school and sit for examinations, they can get a certificate of graduation. They will not get the secondary school diploma, but they will get a certificate of graduation, which they consider equivalent. Northwest Territories, I couldn't find any information to figure out if the student would be eligible for the high school graduation diploma in that province, or that territory. Nova Scotia, no diploma. The territory of Nunavut follows the regulations of the province of Alberta, so no diploma. Ontario is similar in that they have the Ontario High School Equivalency Certificate that they can earn through passing the GED examination. Once again, Prince Edward Island, no diploma. Quebec, the students, if they're homeschooled, they are allowed to permitted to take the examinations leading to the Diplôme d'études secondaires. So, Saskatchewan, no. Yukon, yes, they can get the high school diploma. So like I said, it just varies by province or territory. And the website will have, I'm sorry, the website. The presentation has the website for each province or territory, so if you want more information about homeschooling in Canada. All right, the UK. Do we have anybody from the UK here? No, okay. Did we have anybody from Canada? I forgot to ask. Okay. What province? Okay. Did you know about that or not? Yeah. Oh, okay. So I had it right? Yeah. Okay, good. You always, all right, so in the UK, they call it home education, and it seems to be, home education seems to be actually used more often than homeschool in many countries. Once again, it's only 48,000 students are homeschooled in England and Wales, so but it's gone up a 40% rise from 2014, so you can clearly see that homeschooling is very much on increase in the UK. But only 500 to 1,000 are homeschooled in Northern Ireland. I could not find any documentation for Scotland, but we are doing a presentation on education system of Scotland tomorrow, so I will ask my colleague. Once again, most common reasons, it's just the same as all the other countries. Right now, there is no monitoring of homeschool students, so it's becoming very problematic in the UK. So the House of Lords is preparing a bill. This is as of this summer, I think it was, that I saw. They're preparing a bill that makes the monitoring of homeschool students mandatory. It hasn't been approved yet. In order to homeschool, parents have to go to the head teacher at their local school and get permission, and this permission is not guaranteed. So if the head teacher at the school doesn't want to be bothered with this, supervising these homeschooled parents, they could say no. There's the local council, which is the local government, will check to see if the student is receiving suitable education. If there's any kind of question about how the parents are teaching them, they'll check on this. So students in the UK who have been homeschooled can sit for GCSEs and for A-levels as private candidates. So they do have this option, so they will have some easily recognizable documentation when they finish their homeschooling. Same thing in New Zealand, it's homeschooling. And this is another growing way to teach your children in New Zealand. Same thing, same kind of issues. It seems to be these issues are universal to every single country. I researched on this. They have to get approval from their local Ministry of Education office, and once again, it's not guaranteed. They have to make, if you go on the New Zealand website, there's a lot of documentation that the parents have to submit to prove that their kids are going to be taught as well as any student who's in a regular school. So they have to go through a lot of hurdles to get this permission. And then once they do that, they get them the certificate to exempt them from enrolling them. And now the parent is legally responsible for educating their child. The government says, we give up, it's all up to you. We're not going to be responsible anymore. So that's one of the reasons they put parents through so many hurdles to be able to get this permission. They are eligible to earn the credits towards the National Certificate of Educational Achievement, and they do that through testing at the local school. And there's this thing called, I will not even try to pronounce it. I think it's called Teikura. It used to be known as the correspondence school. So students who are under 15 can enroll in 5 subjects with Teikura, and they can get that exemption certificate. And this is a standardized curriculum and testing, which is many parents like because everybody knows what it is. But if the students are older and they take more than 3 subjects, they lose that home exemption status. So once again, For documentation, they can earn the credits towards the NCEA. Some schools are given special permission to let the children take the tests towards the NCEA. I keep saying NCAA, NCEA. So that's another way that parents like to do this, because once again, everybody knows what the NCEA is and they all understand it. A lot of students can take the Cambridge International exams at approved schools as private candidates. And there is this organization called the Christian Education New Zealand Trust, and they issue this CNEZ Level 3 certificate to homeschool students, which is accepted by universities in New Zealand for admission. It's really warm in here. And I've got a government resource here for New Zealand. Okay. Australia is big on homeschooling, and they also call it home education. And Australia makes it really clear the difference between distance education and home education. They are not the same thing in Australia. In 2017, there are about 12 to 15,000 homeschool students. Once again, same thing, same reasons. You know, as I said, universal reasons for homeschooling. And each state and territory in Australia has its own regulations that homeschool parents have to follow. I'm not going to go through each of these, but you can see what each of the different states require. Victoria is the one that had the most regulations and the most information. Let me see, I forgot to say. It wasn't, if I didn't say it, I should go, I guess. It wasn't clear in the ACT if the students can earn the high school diploma. Same thing, it wasn't really clear in New South Wales, wasn't really clear in Northern Territory, wasn't clear in Queensland, again in South Australia. But it was clear in Victoria that they could get the Victorian Certificate of Education. They have to either enroll in a Victoria registered school or enroll in a distance education program, so they're not going to get it there. The students, once again, in Western Australia are not going to get any sort of certificates. That being said, post-secondary institutions in Australia very much know how to deal with homeschool students, and if you go on their websites, they all have their own regulations and documentation that they're going to look for from homeschool students. And I've got a list of resources for each state and territory. Okay. Quickly, India, homeschooling is really increasing in India. And I found it very interesting because school fees are going up in India, and parents are also very concerned about the physical structure of schools. Schools are falling apart. They don't feel like their students are safe there. They're concerned about their children traveling to and from school for their safety. So many of these parents are now going to homeschooling in India. But if they're going to do that, they have to follow the Central Board of Secondary Education, the National Institute of Open Schooling curriculum, or the IGSC curriculum. So India is very clear about which curriculum parents have to use when they homeschool their children. And it seems like most of the students who are homeschooled live in major urban areas, so you're not going to be finding homeschool students in rural and remote areas of India. They can get documentation, and documentation that we've all seen. So they can earn the senior secondary certificate through NIOS. They can sit for the standard 12 examinations in their local school boards as private candidates, or they can sit for the IGCSE or Cambridge International examinations as private candidates. Mexico, homeschooling is also another place where it's growing. It seems like, though, the majority of the families who homeschool in Mexico are missionaries. And even though they said I wasn't clear if they were missionaries who are not Mexican citizens or people who have come from another country to be missionaries in Mexico. I wasn't really clear on that. Many of their students, families enroll their students in secondary school through preparatoria abierta or open schooling. So Mexico is really good because they're going to also have documentation that we see. So if they do their study through open schooling, they're going to get the bachillerato. Poland I was really surprised, is another country where homeschooling is really growing. So it seemed like after Poland, it started more and more after Poland became more independent. They started offering that. Started in the 1990s. The first secondary graduates were in 2011. So if you see somebody who was homeschooled and gives you something that was issued before 2011, it's probably, I would really double check that, because it's impossible, because those students would not have been finished, they would not have finished before 2011. Again, they have to receive permission from the head of the local school. So if the head of the local school says no, they're out of luck. But if the head of the local school says yes, that person sets the conditions on how the parents are going to be homeschooled. So do we have somebody from Poland here? I thought we did. Yes, is this correct? Oh, okay. I got a whole website there for you. Okay. Okay. But unlike students who are in a regular school in Poland, they have to take an examination every single year to prove that they are being educated. So, and these examinations will be set by that local head of school. Okay. And that's it. So, any questions? Yes. Oh yeah, we did. It's really hot in here.
Hi, I work with the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, and so due to the athletic background and goals of the students that we see a fair number of students who will claim some sort of homeschool in their background, but the way that we treat it ends up being like they haven't been homeschooled most of the time. So the reason I have this question is that in the US model, as you showed, parents are often making their own diplomas, whereas in most of the other countries, you're pointing out the situations where they're getting the standard certificate or some version of it, like a GED. Have you confirmed that there are other countries where the parents are producing the documents? Because our experience has been we basically treat all students as if they were in some sort of distance education program or something like that. We understand there are nuances there, but without a final document that is produced by an exam board or a Ministry of Education or a state board or something like that, we don't accept anything like that. So, whereas we do for US students coming through us, depending on the state and the homeschool regulations related to that. So I was just wondering if you saw anything where the US model was actually replicated in a similar way, or if other countries are consistently appealing to a higher authority than the parents.
There might well be, because I had that list of all the countries where it is, and I just didn't have time to go through every single country. Or if I did, it was in a language I couldn't read.
Yeah.
So if it was in French or Spanish or English, I was golden. But anything else, I couldn't, or if the country did not have anything in English, I couldn't rely on it. So yes, short answer is yes, there could be some countries that follow the US model where parents make up their own diplomas and transcripts. And there could also be countries where the students are eligible to either sit for the examinations to earn that country's secondary school certificate or diploma, or there might be some equivalent diploma or something that could be awarded to those students. It was simply a matter of time
Yeah.
for that. So, but there is, and there could actually be more countries than I listed, because there are certainly more than the countries I put up there. But it's, once again, it was just a matter of time.
Yeah, certainly if you're looking at students who are educated at home for some reason and then sit as a private candidate, we see that from countries all over the world. We just don't usually call that homeschool because the meaning in the U.S. has this particular association with it that we don't tend to find as true. And I was also just going to add that I did secondary school in the UK and finished in 2005 before going to university. And at that time, it was much less common than it is now, certainly. And at the time, I remember it was just starting to be an issue, and there were regular articles in the newspapers about like parents getting in trouble for taking their kids out of school. So it's becoming more standardized, but at the same time, like you're saying, the oversight of it is so that they can make sure students are being educated and also make sure that the parents know what to do so that they're not getting in trouble for pulling their kids out of school.
Yeah, if you Google home education in the UK, there are so many articles, you know, good and bad. You know, it's the worst thing on earth for students. It's the best thing on earth. So it's just like anything in education. I mean, it's the same way in the U.S. I mean, there are people that just can't understand why any parent would want to homeschool, and there are other, you know, homeschool parents who don't understand why why would you send your child to a regular school. So it's the pros and cons for. And I found in every single country, but I would really Google home education in the UK, and you'll find a million different articles about it. Okay, so I'm going to hand this over to my colleague Ildi, and she's going to start talking about vocational education and apprenticeships. This is by far the biggest block of time in this presentation. We have a lot to throw at you, so.
Let's see how we advance with them. So this next part of the presentation, I don't know if you can hear me well. It's good. We'll focus on vocational education and apprenticeships types of programs, and we thought that we will address these two together because generally those types of programs that have an apprenticeship component at the secondary level, they're usually embedded into the vocational education and training programs within the country's educational systems. So in general, vocational education in many countries or instances is referred to as technical and vocational education and training. In the literature, you probably have often seen the abbreviation TVET. In some countries, it's just a VET, sometimes TVET. Don't get tripped up, you know, when you're looking up certain credentials in countries. Vocational education and training exists at the secondary and post-secondary level in most countries. In some countries, it is way more prevalent at the secondary. In other countries, at the post-secondary level. Students enrolled in vocational educational programs earn credentials that sometimes lead to post-secondary study. Sometimes these programs only lead to an occupation. The vocational aspect of these programs sometimes is embedded into the academic programs as a specialization or a track, or in many countries, the vocational programs are parallel outside of the academic track. You know, they can be offered at private and public schools or private training organizations. They can be terminal or preparatory in nature. Those, as I mentioned earlier, that are terminal, they do not lead to post-secondary study, although this has changed over time, which means that in some instances when students are enrolled in a program that it used to be terminal in nature, the educational system allows for an opportunity to sit for additional examinations to earn the credential that will give access to post-secondary study. Those that are both preparatory, those programs that are vocational but also university preparatory, naturally again they lead to a profession, and then they also lead to further study at universities, other types of post-secondary institutions. In some systems of education, when students are enrolled in a terminal program, they may be able to earn a qualification later on or parallel to the one that to the program that they are enrolled in order to gain access to post-secondary programs. Generally, the vocational education has these learning components. There is a school-based component. Students regularly attend school, take subjects that are the general academic subjects, and then they sometimes have workshop-based parts of the program. They can have placements as internships, or they can have a full apprenticeship program as part of the vocational education. In terms of how much time they spend in school and how much time they spend in an internship, work placement, apprenticeship types of structure, that varies. That varies by country and then within the countries as well. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about those programs that have an apprenticeship, a full apprenticeship program component. Those types of secondary level programs that do have this component, they are primarily preparing students for a profession and employment. So typically you're not going to see these having the lead to post-secondary study on its own. So generally terminal. However, they might lead, even if they don't lead to post-secondary study, they might lead to advanced vocational training. And as I mentioned, many or most educational systems will offer the opportunity for students to earn additional qualifications either at the same time in being enrolled parallel or subsequently to gain access to post-secondary study. The types of vocational programs that have the apprenticeship component, they are primarily meant to fill labor market needs. And as such, they are often designed in collaboration with governmental oversight authorities and the industry itself, in which the student is planning to earn the occupational qualification. And if you have come across some of these qualifications, you may have heard this word, the dual nature of these programs, which is exactly, it means that there are two learning places with shared responsibilities. The student is in school for part of the program, but they also have a substantial time spent in a company, in a training company, and these two work together. In most countries that we have looked at, the students before starting the vocational program, even at the vocational school, they have to find a training company where they will spend their apprenticeship, and generally they sign a training contract. The apprenticeship itself does happen under supervision, and most countries do require that students take final examinations in these apprenticeship placement places also to earn the qualification. All the countries that we looked at, there is some type of reimbursement, or students earn a stipend, some type of allowance. And in the countries where this is very much prevalent, these programs are developed with the recognition that it does, these programs offer a lot of advantages to the trainees, students themselves, to companies and the government. Trainees, they earn skills, certification, they earn an allowance, they learn on the job, they have a first-hand experience right away, whether they will be happy in the field that they started to study. Companies have the opportunity to train their own future employees, basically. They have generally a high return on investment, and they also have a stake and influence in the curricula and the examinations. Governments as well, the main concern for governments is the labor market needs. So they're offering these programs in those occupations where there is a need. Now again, as you know, for homeschooling, these types of programs you will find basically in all countries. We will focus on a few where they are more prevalent. We wanted to ask you, yes?
Just one comment.
Sure. You have the mic?
I just wanted to add that apprenticeships, especially in Europe, are getting more and more. So the European Commission is focusing on supporting apprenticeships in the different countries. And yeah, it's their plan that all European or countries who are in the European Union should have an apprenticeship program. And that will be more and more in the next years.
So I wanted to ask you actually, if in your country, if these are very typical programs at the secondary level, and then also in your day-to-day work, whether in admissions or as an evaluator, which are those countries from where you see these types of programs, if you come across any? French ones, okay.
Poland.
Poland, okay.
There are basic vocational diploma, and after that, the apprenticeship.
Okay. Poland. Germany, yes. Haiti. Any other countries?
No? Okay.
Eastern European ones, yes.
Well, in Cuba, you have the big technical manual. Those are all technicals, and they're really big in Cuba.
Yep.
That's the big one.
The technicals, media technicals, yeah.
In almost every field.
Anything else?
You have the dual vocational system in Luxembourg, Switzerland, Austria,
Yep.
Germany, which are like the typical most typical ones.
That's what you see. That's what you see. Yeah.
Yeah, they have like this dual system, only the dual system in most of the countries.
Yep. So, Europe is going to be represented very, very well. We're going to be talking about Germany, Denmark. We have Netherlands included, and then we have Philippines and Australia from outside that are friends as well. And we have the presentation will include some study fields which are in some countries placed at a secondary level that in most other countries you might expect as a degree level, like nursing and teaching. We will share a few comments about those as well. So let's go to Germany. In Germany, vocational education and apprenticeships have a very long tradition at both the secondary and the post-secondary level, and it is, as you mentioned, a very distinct feature of the German educational system. It is very highly regulated and organized. There is the national state government, the industry has a high stakes and a high involvement in designing these programs and also in delivering these programs. And it works really well. It is efficient and very adaptable to the changing industry needs within the country. We figured that in order to understand and being able to evaluate these secondary level vocational programs in Germany, let's take a look at the entirety of the educational system a little bit. I think these images are a little bit small. Once you have the handouts, hopefully this will serve as a useful tool. I don't know if it's worth. Yeah, it works. So, so you see, maybe the benchmarks, the marks that we want to look at this is where elementary education starts. Then you have 4 years of Grundschule, elementary school. Then there is this other line which stands for the 9 or 10-year qualifications in Germany, which give access to the upper secondary level vocational programs. So here you have 4 years, they have 9 or 10 years of total education, and then you have either the 11, 12, or 13-year marks in Germany. And we want to focus on this part of the educational system, which represents these vocational programs. But let's go a little bit back, take a step back. Responsibility for education is divided by the Bund, the federal government, and the Länder in Germany. However, the qualifications awarded in one state are recognized in all other states. When we look at qualifications that are awarded in Germany, we want to look at the type of the school that the student attended, and then also sometimes the credential names in themselves express, in the wording, they express the type of program or school that that qualification prepares them for. So sometimes you see an Abschlusszeugnis, which is a completion certificate, completion certificate of whichever type of school they attended. For example, Abschlusszeugnis der Hauptschule. So this is a living completion certificate from the Hauptschule. But then sometimes the qualification name might express, they have this word Reife in the qualification name, which refers to the type of school that they are mature for now to attend. Such as, for example, the Fachhochschulreife, which we're going to speak about a little bit later. The student who has this qualification is ripe for admission to a University of Applied Sciences. So you always look for, in order to determine that qualification has been awarded and a program completed, always look for these two words, the Abschluss and the Reife. Generally, the Zeugnis in and of itself does not mean completion. It just means a certificate. If it's paired with the word Reife, then it is an actual final qualification. So elementary school lasts 4 years, in Berlin and Brandenburg 6. Then the lower secondary level, which is referred to as Sekundarstufe 1 or Sekundarbereich 1 in Germany, it represents years 5 through 9 or 5 to 10, depending on what type of program the student is enrolled in. Have you come across these words, Hauptschule, Realschule? Those of you that, some of you are nodding their heads. The Hauptschule generally represents years 5 through 9. Sometimes students can take an additional year to extend that 9-year qualification to a 10-year qualification, but the Hauptschule in first place is meant as a total of 9 years of education. Realschule, the Realschule, somebody who completed Realschule has an education of 10 years. The reason I wanted to point this out is because those vocational programs that we're going to look at from Germany, they will require either the Hauptschule level qualification or the Realschule level qualification. And there are a ton of different types of words that refer to either a Hauptschule level or Realschule level qualification. I have a handout. We're going to be sending you that along with the presentation. It can get confusing, especially if someone doesn't speak the language, but oftentimes it's just like a grammar. It's like a different way of expressing the same thing. So students with a 10-year qualification can enter then the upper secondary school, or Sekundarstufe 2, Sekundarbereich 2. Students who follow an academic track will enter either a gymnasium or a Gesamtschule. Gymnasium offers academic programs. Because of the reforms, sometimes this represents years 5 to 12 or 13. It's different in Berlin and Brandenburg because they start in 7th grade. And this these gymnasium and Gesamtschule type programs do include the lower secondary education as well. The Gesamtschule is a type of program or school that offers a Hauptschule program, a Realschule program, and a Gymnasium program as well. So don't be alarmed if you see any of these qualifications. The Gesamtschule can issue a certificate from a Hauptschule or Realschule or Gymnasium. And then at the upper secondary level, we have the vocational upper secondary schools, which we will be talking about a little bit more. Again, admissions requirements vary. Generally, either the 9 or 10-year certificates is required. The length of the programs also varies depending on the type of school that students attend or the field that they are studying. And the name of the qualification that is awarded can vary as well. In general, it is possible to move from one type of vocational program to another type of vocational program. That's easier than moving from from a vocational to an academic track, though. It is possible to go back to school as an adult and earn a qualification, or also to take final examinations with an external examinations authority to earn a vocational qualification. Sometimes you might see a student with a university qualification and they only present an IHK certificate, which is from the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and they're not going to be able to present transcripts or járászagnisse because they only sat for the final examinations and earned the qualification and the right to exercise that specific occupation without going actually through school. You might also find, and this can get a little bit sometimes confusing when working with German credentials, that certain types of schools only exist in certain states, but they offer the same types of qualifications as something that you might find in another state. There are programs that are only school-based, and then there are programs that are offered in the dual system where the students also complete an additional apprenticeship program. So we want to look at some, we will look at some of the considerations for evaluating these credentials. Before we go there, I wanted to see, are you familiar with these words benchmarking or year counting as an evaluation methodology, what it means to you, and which methodology does your organization use primarily? I know there can be a mixture of these two. There are also outcome-based methodologies, but we were just curious which of these methodologies your organization, pardon me?
Okay, go ahead.
We use a secondary, like for the school certificates, we have a different recognition process than, for example, for
all right.
So we don't look at the...
Let's take maybe a couple of minutes to share your discussions. Maybe if one person at each table, just really quickly, would like to share your discussions. More.
Oh yeah. Actually, I think a few people just stepped out, so we'll just wait until they get back. So we have 3 people out right now. Yeah.
Anybody would like to share here? Or just one person from the 3 tables?
You gotta choose one. Draw straws. Someone. Sydney?
Sure. Should we volunteer by us?
I was volunteered by my group. I would say what we talked about is that benchmarking is more prevalent at the secondary level, where you see the 10-year scheme, you see 11 years, you see 12 years. I mean, it varies so much that collectively, I think we believe that benchmarking is more popular at that level, whereas once you get beyond into the post-secondary, it becomes more of counting versus benchmarking. It's more of a mix.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes. Somebody else?
Any questions about what Sydney said? Okay, so let me just go back here. Who would like to volunteer?
Yeah, we were chatting a bit, and I think we pretty much agree with what your group said. I think most of us see, depending on the situation, a combination of benchmarking and year counting, but yeah, at the secondary level, because it can be so diverse, benchmarking seems to be the easier route, because at the post-secondary level, I think generally across the globe, it's a little bit more standardized post-secondary to an extent. And year counting definitely comes into play a bit more. I know at my institution, definitely, at the graduate level.
All right. Anybody else?
I think it's quite similar discussion in this table as well. I want to add that in Japan we have national regulation that if your students completed 12-year education in any country, then they're allowed to go to a Japanese university.
Mm-hmm. So even if you come from a 13-year system, if you completed the 12th grade, you're going to be granted access to university without having completed the secondary sequence in your
That's right,
country.
yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I was going to ask, do you see a lot of Filipino students who have completed 10 years apply for admission to Japanese universities?
Then if they achieve on less than 12 years, and then it depends on the university decision. And I think most of them are asked to do a preparatory program before going into a bachelor's program.
So there is a bridge opportunity to not having to go to school, but they have programs for them to get access. Yeah.
Oh, and if I could add on that, my university's experience.
Sure.
Just from my university's area, and again, I've only been working for a few months, so there may be nuances to this I'm not aware of, but we have had some students, maybe some particularly bright students who have graduated early, maybe not necessarily just that they didn't do all 12 years or whatnot, but maybe they skipped a year or what have you. But because of their age, we either will sometimes request maybe wait to postpone your application, or either you need to have a parent or guardian come with you because you cannot legally stay in our dorms because you're still a minor. Yeah. So it's not necessarily a matter of just their education, but their age sometimes can create an issue.
That's a pretty standard policy at colleges and universities.
We've seen Nigerian students at the age of 14 completing their YX certificates, and we understand that sometimes it poses questions or difficulties, whichever methodology your organization uses, it can get interesting. I'm going to go back to the chart that we had. So, for example, a German educational system, you can come across instances where, for example, a student who completed the Hauptschule, which represents 9 years of education, gets admitted to a vocational program which lasts 2 years. So for a total of 11 years of education, they gain an occupational title. Technically, they completed their secondary education. Those credentials generally don't grant access in Germany to universities or University of Applied Sciences. And at the same time, that 11-year qualification is recognized at the same time as a qualification equivalent to the Mittlerer Schulabschluss, which is the lower secondary education, which again only represents 11 years in the country. So technically, students studied for 11 years. However, the qualification they earned it's benchmarked as a 10-year qualification in the country. So it can be interesting, how you're going to school in somebody with that type of qualification. So that's mainly the reason why we felt it might be interesting or necessary to talk about year counting versus benchmarking at the secondary level. So that's one of the considerations when we are looking at these credentials. You always want to look at you want to always understand the qualification. Naturally, you want to see what the minimum path for a student is to earn a specific qualification in this given state. But then you also want to look at how that student got to it. So it's like there's a qualification that requires a minimum of 10 years of education, but I might have a student who took 11 years, not because they skipped a year, but because they went a different route. How do you assess somebody who did that? You also want to, for Germany, it's important to look at the type of school where the qualification was earned. It's not necessarily the main type of school. So you might have school types that are referred to like a berufsbildende Schule. But then within that school, you have different programs. You can have a Gymnasium program, you can have a Berufsschule program, you can have Berufsfachschule 1 und 2, you can have a Fachschule within that same institution. So you always want to see the documentation. You want to look at the final qualification that was earned. That might give you also clues at time regarding the type of school. And it's also necessary to look at the qualification that is issued. Is it issued by the school only, or do you have an industry player, an authority, an IHK, a crafts chamber that also issued a final examination certificate? We have still time to keep going? Yeah, all right. So, so let's look at programs completed at a Fachoberschule. These schools are full-time vocational schools. They admit students with a 10-year, one of those 10-year certificates. And these types of schools and these programs are meant to train students for admission to University of Applied Sciences. Sometimes students who come with an already completed 11-year qualification, for example, they can be admitted to the second year of the program. These schools impart general and specialized theoretical knowledge and subjects, and then they also incorporate practical skills and knowledge training. The subjects that are taught are usually, the academic subject, German, a foreign language, math, natural sciences, and then there is a vocational focus such as economics and society, and then they have field-specific subjects that are more specialized. And the practical training starts in the first year, which represents the 11th grade in terms of their minimum education. That's when they have the placement in a company or equivalent institution, and then we have a list of the subjects that they generally focus on. The general qualification that is awarded at the end of the program is the Fachhochschulreife or Zeugnis der Fachhochschulreife. It can also be referred to as the Zeugnis, the Abschlusszeugnis der Fachoberschule, which is what we talked about. Like the same qualification can be expressed in terms of that now they are ready to attend University of Applied Sciences, or the final qualification can also say that they completed the Fachoberschule. It represents the same exact qualification. In some states established or introduced schools that have a 13th year. So in those cases, this is a 3-year program, and the students who graduate from those types of schools, they earn a fachgebundene Hochschulreife, and if they also complete a second foreign language requirement, then even from these types of vocational schools, they can earn an allgemeine Hochschulreife, which will give access to not just University of Applied Sciences, but universities as well. Here we have a few examples. They're a little bit small. The first 2 pages are for the same qualification. It's a Zeugnis der allgemeinen Hochschulreife. This is academic. The next one, the one on the right, that's a Zeugnis der Fachhochschulreife. It's small, but it's from a Fachoberschule, which we said that's exactly what we're talking about. Then, the next big types of schools in Germany are those that are completed at a Berufsschule and in the company. And these are the typical apprenticeship types of programs. So this is what's referred to as the dual system, when the students attend school and then they also spend a considerable amount of their training time on the job in the company working and learning. They combine vocational and general educational subjects with skills, work-based skills and competencies that they earn. Once students graduate from these programs, they are entitled to be employed right away in these recognized occupations. There are about over 330, and in every given year, more than 50% of students will start in Germany, upper secondary school in one of these programs. So you can see how important and prevalent it is within the secondary school system in Germany. For the ones that have the apprenticeship component, technically there are no formal admissions requirements, although every field of study has something called the Ausbildungsordnung, which can set certain prerequisites. And most companies and schools will admit students who have either the 9th or the 10th grade certificate. But don't be surprised if you see a student who did not complete either of those and will still be admitted to one of these programs.
And also,
yes.
Just for the 12 years or 13 years. So if you're doing the gymnasium,
I'm slacking off, I'm sorry.
And also don't be surprised if you see like a 12-year certificate or 13-year certificate from the gymnasium. A lot of these vocational education is also for people from gymnasium. For example, if you're working in a bank, you're doing there your apprenticeship. Most of them did before the 12 or 13 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
We see that a lot as well, right? That somebody has completed the academic program. They went through schooling, which used to be 13 years back in the days. Nowadays, it's either 12 or 13. And rather than pursuing their studies at a university, they go back to earn an actual vocational qualification. Many times, probably Kauffrau, that's one of those in business administration that we see often. Or sometimes they start at university and they decided to pursue a career and earn one of these occupational titles. Programs last between 2 and 3.5 years, and about 1/3 of the time is spent at the school, sometimes 1 or 2 days a week. Sometimes they do it in blocks. And then of the overall time that they spend earning a qualification, about 2/3 or 70% of the time is actually spent in the company working and training. The company training itself is controlled federally, and as I mentioned, the Ausbildungsordnungen, which are the training regulations, lay out the specifications for each occupation. At the end of the training, the students generally have to take final examinations, both at the school and the oversight authority as well. And also, as such, they are going to be issued a certificate by both the school and the industry player. The certificates that are issued by the school is the Abschlusszeugnis der Berufsschule with a reference to the occupation. And then the certificates that the oversight authorities are, I'm not sure if I should refer to them as oversight, but the industry players, the certificates that is issued by them, it's called a Prüfungszeugnis, Gesellenbrief, Gesellenprüfungszeugnis, sometimes it's an Abschlussbrief, and it can be issued by the Industrie- und Handelskammer, Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the Chamber of Crafts. I have seen some issued by an Innung for the older types of qualifications, or even the state or the district governments. And we have a couple of samples, I believe, here. This is the Jahreszeugnis, which is technically the transcript issued by the school. If you see, this is from a Berufsschule. So you see at the top it says Berufsbildende Schule 3 Mainz. But then underneath it says a Berufsschule. So the overall school type is a Berufsbildende Schule, but then this person is enrolled in a program which is a Berufsschule type of program. So this is what we want to look for when looking at these documents. This is the first and the second year, and then we have the final certificates. The first 2 pages are part of the Abschlusszeugnis, again, issued by the school, Berufsschule. These are the final grades for the final examinations. And then we have a Prüfungszeugnis, which is issued by the Bezirksregierung, which is the district government in Rhineland-Pfalz. And this person studied to become sort of a business administration and communication, office communication. Yes.
Do you know anything about the timeline between when the school is able to issue a final document and when the government is able to issue?
They are pretty fast. It's not like some countries where you have a year or even month between. Sometimes even for the Zeugnis, it's like within a few days, I believe. I don't know if you have more information about that, but there is not a big delay. Yeah. Sometimes there is a time difference between the. So sometimes the student finishes the 3 years. Let's say it's a 3-year program. They are taking the final examination at the school, and then sometimes might be a half a year delay when the Prüfungszeugnis is issued from an IHK, for example. I have seen that happens, that those are taken a little bit later.
It's typical German efficiency.
So you most of the time you get like 2 certificates, one of the school and one of the chamber or the competent body who is responsible for this type of profession. If you have, for example, something like this, office manager, the IHK, the chambers of commerce and industry is responsible.
It depends on the district also, I think, on the Bezirk and the state, because the next one is actually, yes. So we have this sample where we have the year-end certificates from the Berufsschule, and then we have both a Gesellenbrief and a Prüfungszeugnis. So technically, this is the examination certificate from the Handwerkskammer.
Yes.
And then a Gesellenbrief in addition to that, which is kind of like the final certificate.
Yeah, that's the final one.
Yeah. Any questions? Any other questions?
We will have a credentials pronunciation contest at the end of the presentation.
Fine. It's okay? Is it like a... Oh, okay. I should, or I am? Should, all right. So another type of vocational school in Germany is the Berufsfachschule. So the little difference in the name that it has the Fach in the middle. The biggest difference between the Berufsfachschule and the Berufsschule programs is that these are full-time vocational school-based programs. So this does not have a typical component of the dual system as we have seen at the previous type of program. However, just the same, they also prepare for a regulated occupation. Admission is also based on either the 9 or the 10-year certificate, although in my experience, most students are admitted with a 10-year certificate for these types of programs. The programs can last between 2 and 3 years. The most I have seen is the 10+2 structure. They do complete general and vocational coursework, sometimes even a little bit of a focus on not just 1, but 2 occupations, like the foreign language correspondent with a business specialization. I have come across those very often. And the occupations include the allied health professions, which are usually not completed in the Berufsschule, the dual system. You can find programs in business, foreign language, trade, technical, crafts industry, and home economics and social work-related programs. And then the final qualification is generally a Berufsbezeichnung, which means a vocational title. And then generally what you will see is either a state recognized or a state examined, and then the field of study. It's very interesting though, it's the same qualification can lead to a different title depending on the state. So we have later some samples of a social assistant, in which is a social assistant, a social work type of assistant. The names, in some states, they are referred to as staatlich anerkannter Alltagsbetreuer. I'm not going to read through them all, but you can see the variation. And that's, I think, why sometimes, Germany is maybe a little bit daunting for some of us, without the language knowledge. The information is all there to figure all of them out. Sometimes you might need the language knowledge and really look closely. The Berufsschule and Berufsfachschule, both types of schools, also offer something called a Berufsgrundbildungsjahr, sometimes also referred to as a Berufsvorbereitungsjahr, which is meant for those students who are not ready to be admitted to either of their vocational programs, so they can do a basic preparatory year and then earn the right to start one of those programs that lead to an occupation. And here, for example, this is one of those Sozialassistentin final certificates. As you can see, it's I think this is Bayern. In Bayern, it's called staatlich geprüfte Sozialbetreuerin. This is the final certificate with the subjects, the examination subjects, and then the certificate. That's it? Okay. Now, there is another type of school which is called a Berufsfachoberschule. These are also full-time programs. They are not available in all the states. This is actually a combination of the Fachoberschule and the vocational programs. The first one that we talked about that prepares for for admission to a University of Applied Science. If you look at this, the admission requirement here is a mittlerer Schulabschluss, which is a 10-year certificate, and then a 2-year vocational program that can be substituted by 5 years of work experience. So these types of schools in those states where it's available are offered to those who completed a vocational qualifications. They do have the 10-year certificate, and then they also would like to proceed to higher education. And the programs are the coursework is very similar to those that are offered at a Fachoberschule. These are also 2 years. And they lead to, just as the previously discussed, just like a Fachoberschule program, the Berufsfachoberschule programs also lead to the Hochschulreife, either a Fachgebundene or the Allgemeine Hochschulreife if they meet the second foreign language requirement. There is just some other programs from Germany that are types of schools that combine some of those programs that we have just discussed, such as the Berufliches Gymnasium. In some states, they used to be called the Fachgymnasium, although as I see, most states start to rename and start using refer to them as Berufliches Gymnasium. Yes? They do combine academic and vocational coursework. Again, generally admit students with one of the 10-year certificates. The programs last generally 3 years, and they lead to one of those credentials that admit students to universities or universities of applied sciences. But yet they do have a vocational emphasis also. These are not apprenticeship types of programs. Students do have a focus on one of the vocations, and then at the same time they earn the right to attend the university. This is just, these are those Berufsaufbauschule programs. These have been with time integrated into either the Berufsschule or Berufsfachschule programs that are mentioned with the basic vocational year to prepare them to start one of these programs leading to an occupational title. They used to be 1 year full-time for students who don't have the sufficient 9th or 10th grade certificate. I don't know if we need to go through these. The same, you can see documents issued by a Berufskolleg. These blend different types of programs that we just discussed, and you need to look at the document closely and see what type of program the student graduated from. Can be based on a 10-year prior education. Generally, they last 2 years, and they lead to one of those titles that we already discussed. Berufen, this is a website where if you come across any German credentials, you can go online, especially if you speak the language, plug in the name of the credential that you have at hand, and then it's going to give you all kinds of information about the program, even by state. You can see, the requirements. Some states might have admissions requirements, some might not, and then also the name of the final qualification in a different state. So this is just really to showcase the variation in terms of how you can earn one and the same credential on a different path, and how the final qualifications can also differ. And there are just some resources that you can utilize, hopefully, if you ever need to evaluate any of these qualifications. Let's go to Philippines. All right.
Any questions about Germany? And that was, it's so, I mean, I don't understand it still. And so I always have to look to Ildi for guidance because it's just, there's so many different types and schools and whatever, so.
When you see an educational system like that, you just have to marvel at the efficiency, the way the programs are well thought out for society. Because I started out as a teacher here in the United States, and in this high school where I worked, you have a 20% dropout rate because the kids couldn't handle the academic core standards. And once they dropped out, they couldn't get into a vocational school afterwards. So you had kids on the street doing all kinds of things. That idea of having a vocational program at the 9th grade and just getting them ready to learn something would definitely avoid all those dropouts. And it'll be eventually very beneficial for society. It's just a great academic program. Very good.
I agree. There's a pride in learning the vocation, even if somebody is academically not as, ready to proceed. And it's not just Germany, it's true for many other countries as well.
I think in the European Union or European Commission is thinking that that we have in Germany such a low unemployment rate for young adults is because of the dual vocational system. And I just want to offer, if anybody has some problems with German certificates, you can contact me always. And if you don't speak the language or so on, we will help you.
What's your name?
Marie-Claire.
Marie-Claire.
Yes.
Thank you. Same here. I really love German credentials, actually. Spend a considerable amount of time on them. But I think it makes a difference when you speak the language, probably. It's really needed. Otherwise, it can be really challenging. So, we are always happy to help, find somebody who speaks the language. And if you come across any of these, I think you're going to be taken care of.
All these business cards right here.
How many of you see a lot of German or a number of German vocational documents? A few.
Yeah. Philippines offers a little bit of a different system, so we figured what happened. Yeah, so let's, if we quickly look at the charts of the educational system, this is the secondary level technical and vocational aspect of the entire system in the Philippines, and this is what we're going to focus on. As you can see, that those credentials sit either on the top of, when the students are 16, sometimes you see from 16 to 18. Some of this, the line that it's not a straight line, is due to the fact that Philippines has changed their secondary system, and some of that difference is because of the types of programs that the students can complete. So prior to 2012, elementary education lasted generally 6 years, sometimes 7, with an additional 4 years in secondary school. But starting in 2012-13, there were reforms, and they added an additional 2 years for secondary high school for a total of 12 years of elementary and secondary education. The senior high school tracks, high school programs have 4 tracks, either an academic track, sports, arts and design, or technical and vocational livelihood, or TVL education. And the vocational programs that we will speak about do sit within the TVL track at the secondary level. And I don't know if you have seen any graduates this past summer. As we know, students graduated this last summer in 2018 from the 12-year system in the Philippines. Anybody has come across those? So the vocational programs and apprenticeships types of programs are offered also at different levels in the country. They are overseen, all of them are overseen by TESDA, which is the Technical Education and Skills Development Agency. The programs can be completed at high schools, training providers, or even higher education institutions. And you might want to look closely. Sometimes those programs might not be post-secondary programs. They all have to be, the providers and the programs themselves have to be accredited by TESDA and the programs registered within TESDA's system of Unified TVET program registration and accreditation. There are the qualifications within the Philippine system of education are competency based. So students can earn a national certificate 1, 2, 3, 4, a diploma or advanced diploma. We do consider the advanced diplomas more at the post-secondary level, so we did not really include them here. Those programs that lead to the national certificate 1 and 2 are generally the secondary level, at the secondary level. So there is a sample of a national 2 certificate. This is the one that we see most often. As you can see, it's hard to read, but the TESDA is issued under their authority, National Certificate 2. They list all the competencies that the student earns. As I mentioned earlier, the secondary level programs are offered within the technical, vocational, and livelihood track at the secondary level. And these are meant for students who wish to be employed after completing secondary studies. There are 4 strands. They can study either home economics, agriculture and fishery, industrial arts, or ICT. And once students pass the assessment by TESDA, they are eligible for the National Certificate 1 and 2 that we just saw. These programs have different modalities. Some of them are more school-based. Some of them are center-based. And then there are community and enterprise-based. We're going to look a little bit more at the enterprise-based programs because those are the apprenticeship programs. In the Philippines, there are 3 different types of modalities that students can choose. Either they do an apprenticeship program, a learnership program, or a dual training system. This is a good example to stop and look at how different terms might mean something else in a different country. So all of these include an apprenticeship component. If you look at the one that's actually called the apprenticeship program, is short term, at least 4 months, but a maximum of 6 months. The learnership program is also short, as a maximum lasts for a maximum of 3 months, but they both, all of them have an in-company training component. And then there is a dual training system, which is called as such, but all these other 2 are also technically dual training system because they do have a school-based and also a company-based component. Here also, dual system learning alternates between school and the training center and company.
You should also make it clear, though, in the Philippines, they earn those national certificates in addition to the Katanai and the high school diploma, so they'll earn both certificates.
Yes, so you're going to see the academic component, and then once if you complete assessment with TESDA, because you completed the requirements, then you're going to be also issued the national certificates. You? Okay. Hand it over to Kate for a bit.
All right, so we're going to go to a different part of the world, Mexico. How many of you do? I'm sure you've all seen the Bachillerato Tecnológico and the Bachillerato. So we're really not going to talk about anything most of you have not seen The Bachillerato Tecnológico is done at the secondary school level. Same thing, it's a lot of the coursework is academic, but there is a vocationally oriented program. I can't see what this guy did, but it will actually tell you right there. This one is chemistry, biology. So what they're going to do with that is we'll talk about that in the coursework. We'll talk about what they're actually going to do with that field. The Bachillerato Tecnológico is acceptable for admission to universities in Mexico. So it's is actually learn a profession, but they also have the opportunity to have university study. The bachillerato técnico is not offered anymore, but you will see those, and it's the same thing. It's a vocational program at the secondary level to prepare somebody for a occupation, but also gives them the opportunity to enter university. And this person did clinical laboratory science. So they're actually learning a real occupation. But if they do want to go on to university later, they do have the opportunity to do that. Okay, France. I'm sure you've all seen the French vocational. Yes, no? No? Okay. All right, so yeah. All right, so we have quite a few no's, so we'll spend a little bit more time on France. So France vocational secondary school programs are 2 to 4 years. All depends on the type of credentials they're going to earn and where they're going to be earning it. So we should be really clear that when you see private training organization, if this certificate from France or many other countries doesn't say school on it, but it says some sort of training organization, don't dismiss it as not an official certificate, because there are many, many, many training organizations that are registered and recognized in countries to offer these kinds of programs. It's just some of these training organizations will offer programs that are not offered in a regular school, but they are legitimate. Even though we're focusing on France, you should be aware that the credentials that we're going to talk about are also offered in countries that follow the Francophone or French educational system. So even though it wasn't awarded by France, if you see this credential, you can be fairly certain that it's going to be at the same level and represent the same amount of years of study as in France. So if you understand the Francophone educational system, and you see, for example, you're going to see the CAP. You're going to see this in Morocco. You're going to see it in Algeria. You're going to see it in Tunisia. So if you understand what it means in France, you'll understand what it represents in these other Francophone countries. So the brevet de maîtrise, the master's certificate, even though you see master on a translation, it doesn't mean master's degree. It just means that person has mastered that occupation. It's not a master's degree. The BEP is another program that is very common in France. It's a certificate of professional abilities. So all three of these credentials, the brevet, the BEP, the CAP, are 2 years of study following 9 years of primary and lower secondary. So all three of these will represent 11 years of education. These will let the students go on to further education. It's usually further upward, more vocational study, or it's for employment. So these are the students who go into these programs are not usually academically oriented, although they do include academics, but the majority of the coursework they're taking does represent vocational study. Okay, here are some examples of these certificates. If you're not familiar with France, it's not an official without this wreath and the bow. It's not an official certificate at the secondary school level. So if you don't see this, you see it's right there. It's not official. So first one is a BEP, and this person did it in transportation, routing, and conducting services. I don't know what that means.
Transportation logistics.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. This person who did this CAP did it in cosmetic aesthetics. So you can see it's very, very, very vocational. Somebody who's done this is probably not going to be going on to university, but maybe, who knows, maybe they just wanted to do hair, and then maybe later we'll go on. So, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I meant to take out the brevet de maîtrise. The master's are half 2 years after a CAP or a BEP program. So they will represent, excuse me, 13 years of education. Because remember, it was 9 years elementary, lower secondary, then they do the CAP or the BEP for 2 years. And they do these programs for another 2 years. So it's going to be 13 years of education, but this is considered a benchmark vocational end of secondary school credential in France. These students are not awarded advanced standing in French post-secondary because even though they've done 13 years, whereas normally it's 12 years is considered the end of secondary education in France. They're not awarded advanced standing in university, only because the programs are so vocationally oriented. They just don't have the academic background as a student who had not gone through these programs. The first two, the brevet de maîtrise and the technical brevet, these only lead to employment. These students who hold these, there's no chance for them to go to the university. There is a chance for them in France to take an examination that shows that they have sort of had the equivalent knowledge to enter, but these are not. However, though, the baccalaureate professionnel, the professional baccalaureate, that students who do complete that program are eligible to apply for admission to colleges, to universities in France. Okay. This last one, the Bac Pro, this is usually called Bac Pro in France, is a vocational program, but it's not going to be. It's going to be a more technical thing. So you're going to be seeing students doing computer science, some sort of business. Even though we'll train them for a profession, it has a higher academic component than these other two schools. So here's an example. So the first one, the woman did men's and women's hairstyling. So this certificate, the brevet de maîtrise, you can see that kind of program is not going to lead to university study. Whereas here's a Bac Pro, and this person did electrotechnical and numerical systems. So as you can see, it's a little bit more, probably a little bit more advanced than doing men's and women's hairstyle. And so that will lead to university study. Okay. So, Australia.
Should I, or do you want to? Do you want to do it?
Yeah, I'll do this.
Go ahead.
So this has become a really big thing now in Australia, as their vocational education has really started to grow in Australia. Before 1995, they called it TVET. So just as Ildi talked about earlier, it was known as TVET. Now it's known as vocational education in Australia. So each state and territory has their own qualifications. So what's offered in New South Wales might not be offered in the Northwest, the Australian Capital Territory. So each state is different. They'll have different qualifications. Every state is different. So just because it's offered in one place won't necessarily be offered in another place.
Up to 95, yeah, like up to.
Yeah, this is prior to 1995.
Yeah.
So prior to 1995, all of these programs were based. They had this National Register of Australian Tertiary Education, or RATE. So RATE is no longer around, but if you could go back and find it, and you can see how the qualifications were in each, where they were rated on each of those in that system, so you can see where they were and where they would have been in each different state or country. In the rate system, they had several different levels. So if you had a certificate, you had to, it usually meant you had finished the equivalent of year 10, that was the admission requirement, It was 1 to 3 years, depending on the state and the program, very vocationally oriented. And they were usually school-based, and they were offered at the technical and further education institutions. I was always taught that they were called taffy institutions, but my very
I was
good
also wondering.
but my very good friend in Australia said, we don't call it that. And I said, okay, then we've been calling it the wrong thing in the US. So, but a TAFE institution offered these certificates. And then you could get an advanced certificate, which is another 2 years, you know. And then they had apprenticeship and trade craft awards that were 3 or 4 years. The bottom one, the apprenticeship ones, were very, 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 very vocationally focused. So it's really, you could see it was plumbing, automotive, carpenter. So it was really, really preparing you for a profession, and you weren't going to be admitted to a university based on these. But now, things have changed. So in TVET programs, it's offered through the state and territory governments, the federal Australian government, and once again, like Germany, it's in collaboration with industry to see what kind of people they need to train to work in these different industries. And the Australian Skills Quality Authority, or the ASQA, is one of the regulators of training. So, but there are several different ones, and I listed here all the different states and territories that follow this, but the state of Victoria has their own authority, and the state of Western Australia has their own authority that regulates vocational education in Australia. And once again, like other countries, they have all these different kinds of organizations that offer TVET. Private training providers, again, don't be alarmed if you see that it's not from a school, but a private training authority. They have to have been registered and approved by one of the regulating authorities that we saw before. So the students who do a TVET program at the secondary level, they have all different kinds of options when they finish. So they can go on to one of the TAFE institutions, they can go on to a university, or they can go on to employment. It all depends on what kind of program they went to and if it was more academic or more vocationally oriented. And if you go on to the Australian qualifications framework, all of these certificates are here. So if you all understand, do you all know what qualifications frameworks are? Okay. It's it was this, qualification frameworks were part of the Bologna process, which means each country has to organize all the qualifications in their countries at a certain level. So if you understand that in Australia, level 7 is a bachelor's degree, that will help you to understand what these levels are. So a certificate 1 is at the very lowest level on the TVET or the Australian's qualification framework. Okay.
It's interesting though, in Australia, the secondary school certificate is not actually rated on the framework. So they state that the senior secondary certificate of education qualifications are not located at a particular level within the framework. So sometimes, you know, when you want to establish the equivalency for these vocational secondary qualifications, you want to look at like, okay, where is the level in the academic track, which is kind of like at the same qualifications framework level. It's a little bit trickier here in Australia for that reason. So you need to look at other components or characteristics of the program. I thought it was very interesting though. So usually high school credentials are.
I spoke with someone from at the ACRO meeting this past year from Australia who was talking about how there's a concerted effort right now across the different states for them to gather the different TAFE qualifications by state and the university entrance requirements by state, and it's going to take a while, but they're starting to gather that information, and hopefully it'll be available to the outside. So in sometime hopefully in the near future, we'll have a better understanding of how some of those levels work across the whole country.
But each individual university will list it on their website.
At the moment,
Yeah.
that's the track, but then there's more collaboration at the state level where
Right.
they're trying to gather that information.
To have one central
Yeah.
place to hold that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is, it is a little pain if you have to go on each university website. And not to speak anything badly about Australia, but I find that some of those university websites are very difficult to navigate and figure out where something is. You know, if you want to find the admissions requirement, you actually have to go into the actual department. There's not one central location. So that would be wonderful if it was all in one place instead of having to go search in a website that you just, it's not very, sometimes, some of them are just not very intuitive. So currently in TVET in Australia, it's very different from other countries. Their qualifications are based on learning outcomes. So it's based on what they expect somebody to learn and know once they finish. So it's not based on a study volume, a length, or credits. So right now, if in many other countries, you're used to seeing, well, this represents this many years of education. That's not the same with vocational education in TVET in Australia. So they really looking at what the outcome is and not the length of study that the student has. And once again, like all other countries, admission and the length of country varies. Length of study varies depending on what kind of qualification they're earning. So here's an example of some of these certificates. This is Certificate 1 in Early Childhood Education and Care. This was done at a university preparation college. So it wasn't a secondary school. This is a training provider. So this is a certificate, and this is the transcript, so you can see what they actually studied. Here's a certificate in foreign business. This is from the Lonsdale Institute. Once again, there's no standardized diploma. Unlike France, all the diplomas will look differently depending on the institution that awarded it. Okay. Previously, Australia had what they called the new apprenticeships, and they established these in 1990. But recently, they renamed them to Australian apprenticeships. They can get these apprenticeships. They can get those level certificates 3 and 4, which we just saw. If they were earned after year 12, it's a diploma, and also advanced diplomas after year 12. So we're not going to focus on the diplomas and advanced diplomas. Over 500 different occupations in these programs. Anybody can enroll in these programs. It doesn't matter, as long as you're of working age. But it's not really clear what they consider working age. So I guess that's a matter of interpretation for each training provider. You don't have to have you don't have to have finished any kind of education. So if you dropped out, if you actually finished, you can actually go back and do an apprenticeship in Australia. Full and part-time. If it's based in a school, it's going to be a combination of academics and on-the-job training. Lengths of study, once again, it all depends on the qualification. And each state or government, each state or territory government will determine what the pathway is working with industry. So once again, they're looking at what the manpower needs are in that state or territory to determine what they're going to offer and what the pathway is going to be. So it could be a 1-year program, it could be a 4-year program, all depending on what the occupation it is and how long they determine that it should be to adequately train that person. And it's a nationally recognized qualification, meaning that no matter what state or territory it was earned in, it'll be recognized throughout the country. Okay. Got some information there. It's almost time. Yeah, it's almost time to take a break. I know I could see some. This is a lot of. I know it's a lot to throw out at you. So there are refreshments outside, and If you want to be back in about 15 minutes, actually, it's supposed to go till 3:30, so we'll give you an extra long break. Okay. So we'll see you back here at 3:30.